right, here we go. So today's session is going to be on managing styles. Just a reminder, some of the important things to remember when I go through these things is that there is no one size fits all. And there's many options to all of these things: goal setting frameworks, communication frameworks, and in this particular case of today, styles of managing. And they're very situationally dependent. And your real goal is to figure out what works for you, how you can apply these things in your day to day. So the goals for today are to help you understand and identify what style works for you in certain situations, and really to double down on what that is and become more flexible when that style doesn't apply. Common themes again: no one size fits all. Things are going to be different for you and for your team. And the best and most effective things are often going to be reflective of your own strengths and your values as a manager. So to understand managing styles, keep in mind that there's different styles for different situations. And a lot of these styles are simply defined by the method of communications and decision-making and motivation. Oftentimes, the best approach is to blend management styles. But again, it depends on the situation. And as we go through some of these, you'll understand how to make use of the different types of styles. So the types of managers there's more than this. There, like you can see it broken down into 12 management styles or 4 or 5. I picked the ones that I've sort of aligned to most over the years. But that doesn't mean there's not more styles and that they can't even be further broken down. So we're going to go through each of these in a little bit more detail, and explain how they can be useful for you. So what I did was I broke each one of these management styles into a definition, a focus, a set of values, and a couple of samples of when these things should be applied. So what outcomes do you want by using this management style is sort of the values. The goals is the focus, and when to use is sort of the how do I apply this methodology. So let's get right into it. The authoritarian style or commanding style of management are sort of defined by a centralized decision making with clear direction. So the goal of this kind of style is like clear control and direction, and it's usually from the top. It's usually, the person on top saying, this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do it. Does everybody know exactly what they're going to do and in what order? So again, the values: clarity, efficiency, and order. And this is really common in crisis situations, or if you've got completely new teams that don't know what to do. So you say, while they're learning, okay, you do this, you do this, you do this, and in this order. Or quick decisions are necessary. Sometimes it's not a crisis, but it's just something needs to be determined very quickly. You say from on high, this is what we're doing. Go ahead. Everybody know what they're doing. Let's move. Right. And that's sort of the authoritarian style, the commanding style. Transformational is more towards like when you need to inspire and motivate, like you bring a large group of people, you bring any group of people towards a shared vision. And your focus is on bigger picture goals. How do we get there? How can we be creative? And the values are like visionary, growth, empowerment. It's really making sure that the people are involved in the process of determining what the next steps are and then actually executing those next steps. Although sort of when you're planning, it's more transformational. And when you're executing, it can be considered more democratic, but we'll touch on that in the next slide. So a good example of when to use this is if you're launching new initiatives, like a brand new project. If you want to come up with more creative solutions for how to get around a particular problem, or like what we just did recently was go through a period of organizational change. So the democratic side is when you encourage team input in decision making. And that's really just asking the team, like, how can we do this together? Like, who has ideas? Please share those ideas. One of the things that's particularly interesting and challenging with democratic or participative leadership styles is you really have to get everybody involved. If you have 3 people in a room and only 2 of them are talking, then that's not really going to be, it's somewhat democratic, but it's this inclusion and this openness is really a difficult thing to do to get everybody involved each time you do it. And so that takes a specific type of leader or manager to get people comfortable enough to speak up or be a part of each of these situations. And I find this to be particularly useful in brainstorming, in strategic planning, and honestly, just building trust in difficult situations where you just get everybody to participate and people can hear the ideas of the other folks. Another challenge that happens oftentimes with this is some people are better at engaging after they've had a chance to think about it. And so sometimes democratic or participative leadership means saying, okay, everybody understand what we're trying to do here, then giving people time to think rather than people who can think and operate out loud or on the spot. So learning to balance those concepts is actually really important. Laissez-faire. So this is sort of hands-off. This is when you built trust with your team and they built trust with you, and it allows your team to take charge and sort of do things on their own with minimal supervision. And that focus is on autonomy or on the team to be able to do whatever they need to do. And that shows trust on both sides. So you're giving independence, and you're doing that because you're confident that the team, when empowered, can do the thing that they need to do. And this is better for experienced teams, long-standing relationships, or when some people require or teams or solutions require creative freedom. Also for problem-solving sessions, right? So if I'm running a problem-solving session, I might be a little bit involved, but usually I try to bring in people that I trust to do a job effectively, and then I will back off and make sure that everybody is able to contribute and has given their ideas to the best of their ability. Transactional. So transactional management style it's very results driven in the sense that it's like, here's your role, like here are the tasks you need to perform, and here's what you get for doing it. And it's very sort of specific, and with a focus on structure, routine, accountability, and direct feedback. Like, here's what you're doing, here's how often you're doing it, here's how I'm going to check on you, and here's what I'm going to do when I've checked on you, right? It's sort of like very rote. And the values here are, order, like very clear, like this is how it happens. This is why you're doing it. This is the clarity of purpose, and it's consistent. It's often like, hey, you're doing the same thing or the same type of thing. A lot of times you'll see these sort of transactional management style if somebody is not doing, or you'll use it when somebody maybe isn't performing the best that you need them to do, and they're capable of doing more. So you might do it for short-term goal setting, or if the organization or the team is in crisis mode, and you need to just do a couple things every day consistently to get out of that problem space. You might say, hey, this is the set of routines that we need to do to get ourselves into a better position. And so I find it very useful in that respect. Servant leadership. This is putting the needs of the team first and emphasizing their growth and well-being. So in a very real sense, this is anybody who deals with me on a regular basis will know that I often ask the question, how can I support you? And that is because I believe that servant leadership is a very strong way of building teams, because I like to empower people. And so when I'm doing this, when I'm performing this sort of servant leadership mentality, I will say, how can I support you? And then I will listen, And so right there, I'm doing the empowerment because I'm giving you the ability to do things. I'm listening to what you might need. And if some of the things that you might need is help or advice, I will do my best to give that to you. So that's an example of sort of how I do this. And it's good to do this servant leadership thing when you're trying to create confidence within your team, or help foster the right kind of balance between your team being able to execute things on their own and when they check in with you, and really just sort of making yourself not a single point of failure for knowledge or experience or certain things like that. Coaching. For this, I like to think about this as probably the thing that I do most, is try to coach all of the teams into being better as teams. And actually what we're doing here in this management training is the kind of coaching that I think yields the best kind of results. So I focus on personal growth, mentoring, and career progression. Uh, the values here are development, patience, and really understanding that some of this stuff is difficult. And so you use this in skill development sessions. And one of the reasons that I find these things to be like coaching to be such a valuable uh, tact or management style is because a lot of the things that I'm teaching or talking about or lecturing on here in these people manager sessions are things that, yes, they're available in rote form. You can read this book or that book or this blog post or whatever. But these are things that I put together that have served me really well over the last 10, 15 years of management. And I hope to be able to impart some of these things in a sort of coaching fashion to everybody here so that it doesn't take 5, 10, 15 years for everyone to figure out and make use of these things, but to actually be able to take these things into your daily jobs and make use of them hopefully sooner rather than later and have a stronger foundation to build on. So how does that actually work? So the way that I try to identify my style is really just asking people, talking to them, reflecting on past experiences. Like, how did I do this situation? How did I handle this particular situation? Could I have handled it better? Was I too direct? Was I not direct enough? And asking people with whom I have a good rapport, whose opinion that I trust, and people who tend to be somewhat emotionally intelligent and self-aware of these situations. Also figuring out, do these people that I'm asking have the right amount of information on the team dynamics or the right information about what's going on? And because all of these lessons are baked in my ability to do my job, my ability to communicate, other people's ability to communicate back to me, the situation and the people are also really important to take into account when you're trying to figure out what style works for you. Also seek peer feedback. One of the other reasons we do these people manager sessions is so that you can talk to other managers. You can realize, hey, we're all sort of learning the same sets of information here. So let's see if we can't make use of it by having further conversations. You can also take personality assessments. Myers-Briggs is a pretty popular one, to see where you fall on that. There's a bunch of them. Some of them are useful, some of them aren't, but I think they're all directionally interesting in that you can say, oh, I'm a INTJ or, ENFP or whatever the set of things that you might be. Once you start to figure out things that work for you really well or really poorly, you need to start doubling down on the ones that work well for you. And the way that works well, the way that you find out whether things work well for you is if you try for an outcome and it happens, and then you're like, oh, this thing actually worked really well. What was this that I did well here? And as your team continues to grow, as your own skills and your own confidence continue to grow, you can sort of adjust the styles depending on the situation. And being flexible is also really important, right? How do I make sure that I'm not trying to pick the coaching approach and then use it for every single situation? Because that's often not the case. That's often not how things work. One of the things that's also incredibly difficult to do is that once you find something that works, to not feel like that's the silver bullet, right? If you find that, hey, we were in a crisis situation and I needed to be a little bit more commanding or authoritarian, and it worked really well to get us out of the crisis situation, that doesn't mean that that's the thing that you should stick to every time because it worked once. And also, the more often that you do things that are authoritarian and that's not taking into account the needs or the personalities or the situation of the people, the harder it's going to be to build that trust, to have the difficult conversation. So all of these things are a balance of here's how you build trust between yourself and the rest of your team, your other teams that are to your right and left, and how you then engage and how you expect them to engage with you. And once you've done something, you can then take the feedback. And sometimes people will give you feedback like, hey, I don't like the way you did that. And they may not like the way you did that. There may have been a better way to do it, and the way you've done it may have worked. That's one of the nice things about management and leadership is that, and it's also the not so nice things, is that the responsibility is yours. So somebody cannot like the way you did it. It worked, and there might not have been a better way, even though they might not have liked it, but everything worked out well. But that doesn't mean you should ignore their feedback, because most of the time when people complain, complaining means that they care. Probably should have put a slide in on this, but complaining when you get feedback means oftentimes people care and they want something to change and they want it to be fixed. They want it to be different. And looking for the nuggets of truth in people's complaints is a really important skill to have. And I'll probably do something talking about this in the future. But you shouldn't ignore people's complaints because they're unhappy or because they're frustrated and you hear the same thing over and over and over again. You should know that there is truth at some level in there, and being able to pull out the most interesting things is where you really get value, and where sort of, in my experience, a lot of that self-growth comes from, like reflecting on those comments. And I think that's really important to being a good manager. So how do I do this? I gave some examples already, but it depends on the situation. It depends on the person, it depends on the project, depends on the timeline, depends on the level of trust. There's so many things. And I'm sure everybody has at some point has heard me say the phrase, any sufficiently complex problem where the answer doesn't start with "it depends" is probably wrong. And that's what it is here. But, it wouldn't be really teaching if I said like, it always depends. So how I actually do it is I really just ask myself a lot of questions. And over the years, I've started to get more of a gut feel, because I've done it. You do things enough times, you start to get more of a gut feel. But I always have a few goals that help me make this decision. First, I ask myself, like, what is do we have time to make a decision? Do we have the ability to consult with other people? Are these other people I already trust, or do I not know if I can trust them? All of these sort of questions that I need to ask myself to figure out how much leeway I have to build up other people in that moment. And then I start to ask other people questions, right? To sort of assess, like, do I know if I can trust this person? And then I'll start asking questions about their knowledge or their ability to handle this situation, or what kind of support they think they need or don't think they need. But one of the things I always try to do is allow people to make mistakes and learn on their own. If we know that we have to have a project done by October 1st, and we think it's going to take a week, then we may say, hey, let's give this to the person with the least amount of experience, who has the most to learn here. And then we support them. And that project that takes 1 week may take 2, but now that person is more experienced. They've learned a bunch of lessons. They've learned how to plan. They've learned how to deliver that project. And yeah, it took a little bit longer, but now we've got more capability around the organization. And if after a week, it doesn't look like they're going to get it done, now you've got an opportunity to learn, and you've still got time to go in and clean up the project. And hopefully that person has learned something, even if they weren't able to follow through. So how I actually do this is I assess every situation. I look for the outcome where the people around me can stand to gain the most, and then try to apply the right management style for moving that project, moving that thing forward. The other thing that I do in a very specific way is regularly seek feedback. Everyone who has been in a meeting with me has heard me ask the question, does that make sense? Or do you understand? There is 2 ways that question is often interpreted. One way, which is not the way I usually ask it, is a level of questioning my confidence in my ability to deliver that information. Oftentimes when people say, does that make sense? It's like, I'm not sure if I could deliver that information. And it can oftentimes be around, inability to communicate, or people ramble or whatever. Oftentimes when I'm asking, hey, does that make sense? Do you understand? It's not me wondering if I delivered the information well. I might have done it well. I might have done it poorly. It's checking to see, are you checked in, tuned into the conversation enough so that you can say, I do understand that, or I don't understand that. And so when I seek feedback, sometimes it's me just checking in, and sometimes it's saying, hey, you know what? I'm not even entirely sure I understand the problem. So can you tell me what I just said, so that you can tell me, so that we can both see to um, that the situation is going to move forward in a way where we both have some level of mutual understanding. So asking for feedback, seeking feedback in individual conversations, and also in um, project scenarios or whatever, like, do you understand this problem? Do you understand how we're going to get here? Do you understand why we chose this solution over another? That kind of regular growth not only applies to project problems, but also people management. Doing management training. So management training is very rarely done in most places. Sometimes you'll do it like once a year. And I think that's a big problem. I don't think that really allows people to grow. And that's why I spend so much time here in this group getting people to do this kind of training, because I think it's incredibly valuable. And that's why I do the workshops, so that we can all work together. And there's a lot of great blogs or TikToks or YouTube or Instagram videos that are digestible content that you can take away. So focusing on continuous growth is pretty valuable. Also, remaining adaptable. So knowing that your growth, the growth of your team, whatever happened in a particular day, those things can change like massively. Somebody can have, you could be expecting Eric to come in and have 1 day worth of work left on a project that's been taking 3 months. And Eric comes in and has an awful day, just like cranky, didn't sleep well, not feeling great, but showing up for work anyway. And the way you have to handle Eric at that point is completely different than you would on any other day. And so knowing that the changing demands in a project that might be due today, and trying to figure out how to support Eric in finishing that, or figuring out another way to get the project done. All of these things are what an adaptable manager does, is sort of assessing their people and the situation on a regular basis. And to sort of call back to what we did for the last lecture session, you can figure these kinds of things out in one-on-ones and in stand-ups or things where you see people regularly, and how are you doing? And this kind of thing, your ability to recognize changes in your teams, the situation, et cetera, that's what builds trust. And that builds morale when you've got a member, when you've got a manager that can see when things change and can talk to you about it and can help you feel more at ease with the situation. So being able to communicate effectively with your team, with your other leader, with your leaders and with other leaders is going to be how you remain adaptable. So this was a much shorter session. And the reason for that is because the last session was very, very dense and a lot longer. And I think I lost some people a little bit more than I wanted to. So I want to have a little less information this time. I wanted to cover when we do the next workshop, I'm going to explain why I sort of chose to take a little bit lighter approach this time. But I want everybody to sort of walk away from today feeling like the kind of information you got today should feel very obvious. It should feel like, oh, yeah, of course my life is going to be easier if I'm sort of authentically myself, or I address different situations differently, or I try to pick the right style for the right situation, or I empower people so I build trust. Everything I said today should feel incredibly obvious. And if it doesn't, that's actually also okay, because these kinds of things feeling obvious mean that you've been doing this for a little bit, or you've engaged with people in situations long enough to have learned some of these lessons in really difficult ways. Like, you can't show up to your friend group and everybody's not in the same mood every single time you see them, right? Some of these are really obvious. But being able to categorize how you spend your time with people in meetings, that was a good example of the last session. Being able to characterize how you present yourself as a team leader when you show up to whatever those meetings are, or when you're preparing for those meetings, or when you're running into somebody randomly in a hallway, which happens less with teams. But these kinds of things are obvious, but also hard to sometimes articulate why you do something or what the right situation is. So I tried to give a couple of examples throughout this. So I hope that this deck was pretty useful. And I hope that this kind of information allows you to be a little bit of self-reflective with how you choose to be in certain situations and how you choose to discuss things with your teams, and how you choose to present yourself in front of your teams, in front of other teams, and in front of your manager. So this was a much shorter session, 30 minutes instead of the close to hour. I hope everybody found this useful. I will make the time adjustments, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.